Laura Alvarez. I am originally from Spain, but I've been living in the Bronx for the past 14 years. And I worked right across the Poe Cottage, the museum that is in the Bronx, for roughly like 5 years. I was working at the visitor center right across the museum, and I did many activities based on Poe. I created like a little coloring book. I We did readings, celebrated his birthday. We did a lot of things around Poe. And one of the things that we used to do, it was writing classes. And the teacher was convinced that I could write a children's book because I'm an illustrator and I'm an artist. And I was like, no, I can draw it, but I cannot really write it. It's not my thing. And she was so persistent that I did. I did write the book. And for probably like 7 or 8 years, it was just in a shelf, just there, the whole dummy, the whole illustration ideas, the whole text revised and everything. And when the pandemic hit, I was like, maybe I should go back into that book that I was supposed to finish. Eggy's Adventures at Poe Cottage. I got a grant. I started a GoFundMe, and I finished illustrating the whole book. I revised the text with a new editor, and here you go. That's how it happened. So the book is based at the Poe Park, and it's a little squirrel that lives at the park, and he looks through the Poe Cottage window every day. And one day he realizes that his great-grandfather was best friends with Edgar Allan Poe. So he's like, oh man, now I have to do something. Now I want to be part of this history. How can I be part of this cottage and this museum that is here now? And he goes through a lot of trouble with the caretaker of the house, but he finally, he gets to be that person that is the best friend now of the caretaker of the house. So now he gives the tours and he's part of that history of the museum. I have plenty of ideas with Eggy, and it's hopefully it's going to be a series of books with Eggy, because Eggy is a little squirrel and he's very curious, and he's like a little child from the Bronx. Basically, he's from the street. He just wants to be part of something, and something that I realized working just across the Poe Museum is that a lot of people, even though they live across the street from the little cottage, they don't even know what it is. They have no clue what was there. They had no clue about that Edgar Allan Poe lived there. They have no clue about Batman being created just right there, just because of the memories of and all the literature of Edgar Allan Poe. So it's good to introduce kids in an early stage of what are they looking at every day. And that house is important, and recognizing the landmarks you have in your own borough is really important. I did a little like folding coloring book based on poems of Edgar Allan Poe poems, and I would like to redo that in a deeper way, and having more poems illustrated. And I use a lot of words in my illustration work. I love lettering. So his words always gave me something that I could work with, and that I could, and my work is also very creepy sometimes. It's cute, but it's creepy. So I think that's like something similar to his work, that is really weird, but it's creepy. I have my website, is lauraalvarez.com. Is my name, just but one A in between, because I'm a little cheap sometimes. And eggysadventures.com. Also, you can go there and find Eggy's book. You want to find me on Instagram, is Big Eyes World. And I'm all over the place. So if just Google my name in the Bronx, and you'll find me for sure.
The king grew purple with rage and threw the contents of the brimming goblet in his face. And now, while the entire assembly were convulsed with laughter, the jester suddenly uttered a shrill whistle, grabbed a chain that hung from the candela's chandelier, and with speed wrapped the king and his 7 ministers tightly together and pulled them violently up 30 feet. And leaving them suspended in midair between the skylight and the floor, Hopfrog, climbing the chain as it rose, thrust a torch of fire down towards them. Aha! I now say who these people are. He held the flambeau to the flaxen coat, which enveloped the king, and which instantly burst into a sheet of vivid flame. Within half a minute, the whole 8 were blazing fiercely amid the shrieks of the multitude that gazed at them from below, horror-stricken. I now see distinctly what manner of people these maskers are. They are a great king and his 7 privy councillors. A king who does not scruple to strike a captive fool, and his 7 councillors who abet him in the outrage. Well, as for myself, I am simply Hopfrog, the jester. And this is my last jest.
Hi, so my name is Hannah Raven. I am an actor, burlesque artist, and theatre maker. I have worked in feature film, TV, theatre for pretty much my entire life. I came to love Poe from seeing a production of Barry Kosky's The Telltale Heart in Melbourne, probably about 20 years ago. And it affected me so much that I went away and started reading Poe, and I was like, who is this guy? What is he about? What has he written? And I just read so much Poe within the span of like 2 weeks after seeing that show. And I fell in love. Like, I literally felt like I had found true love. Poe speaks to me in a way that other writers and playwrights don't. And from there, I decided, because I am an actor and a theatre maker, I then started playing around with Poe stories and Poe characters and using them in my burlesque shows, and then creating eventually a stage spectacular called The Grotesque and Arabesque. I wanted to create a show that was not only Poe-based, but was incredibly entertaining. So with my background in burlesque and theatre making, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was a circus burlesque cabaret show, Explosion, that was all based on Edgar Allan Poe characters? So that's where I started. And then I started working with my friend David Halgren, who is an actor in Sydney, because my main concern for the show is that I didn't want it to just be some random show of people doing, oh look, I'm Hopfrog, and look, I'm Ligeia. I needed something to tie it all together and make it a theatrical linear experience. So I hired David Halgren to play Edgar Allan Poe, and Edgar Allan Poe acts as the MC of the show, welcoming the audience, bringing them in, and then in between each of the routines, he actually speaks a bit of text, like Telltale Heart or Hopfrog, and then as he speaks about these characters, they emerge, and then they perform a routine that is based on that character and based on the story. So for me, I wanted to be as accurate as I could with the character and the story, and not make it a bit sort of I wanted to be very precise, basically, and make sure that people watching it were quite blown away. So that's because I'm so influenced by Poe and his stories and the themes in his stories. And so I wanted to make sure I did justice to the stories and not just kind of, as we say in Australia, half-arse it. I've thought about it quite intensely, and it would be The Telltale Heart. And that is because for me, reading that story, even though the protagonist's gender is not specified, I always read that character as a woman. I always read it as a caretaker, a maid, a nanny, or who was taking care of an elderly man, which is quite common now and, you know, hundreds of years ago. So I want to explore that story from a female perspective. And I want to do it as a theatre production and make it something that is accessible for people to come into the world of this woman and see the pain and anguish she is going through and why she does what she does. Because I think when a lot of people read Poe, they just read it as, it's so gory and it's so weird and this guy's creepy. And it's like, Well, no, actually, the psychology and the psychological introspection of the characters is incredibly complex, especially for the time in which Poe was writing it. I mean, this is like before Freud came out with all of his psychological introspection theories. So for me, it is rich with trauma and motive, and that is something I would love to sink my teeth into. I run Raven Productions Australia. So you can go to ravenproductionsaustralia.com and you can find all of my theatre work. I also am the president, if you will, of the Edgar Allan Poe Society of Australia. So you can go to Edgar Allan Poe Australia on Facebook, EAP Australia on Instagram, and you can follow me there. You can message me. I love meeting fellow Poe people and working with fellow Poe people to create theatre and work. And I'm hoping to get back to the States soon and work with a couple of Poe fans and do some theatre over there.
My name is Trisha Leigh Shufelt. I am a self-taught artist and author and poet. And I've been a Poe lover for as long as I can remember. I think most of us get our experience with Poe in probably elementary school reading The Raven out loud. So it started there. But as far as what I'm doing today and with the Poe Tarot, that was a project that came about around 2017. I started working on it, and it had a different incarnation altogether than what is seen today. But just a great love for him, and wanted to kind of put it in. I thought a tarot deck would be perfect, a perfect pairing with his stories and poems. It's basically, I have it here with me in case anybody wants to see it, but basically it goes through, Poe is the main character, and he kind of goes through the fool's journey. So it's start to finish, he's in it throughout. It's based on the Rider-Waite-Smith standard tarot. So it's easy to read for people who are familiar with that, but it incorporates a lot of his poems and stories through quotes and images. Trying to think here what I could say that would, you know, it just incorporates a lot of the stories that people are familiar with, like Masque of the Red Death and you know, the Telltale Heart and that kind of thing. So some of the images reference those kind of things. Well, this is the funny part about this deck. Like I said, when I first started doing this or creating this deck, it had a completely different look to it. It was more of a collage style. I used a lot of like mortuary type things and statues and whatnot. And I actually submitted it to its current publisher, Schiffer, and they rejected it, which is kind of funny. But I thought, I've got a really good idea here. I don't want to lose this. So I went back and I thought, what could I do that would be different. And if I could do anything, how would I want it to look? And I thought of Ed Gorey and his style of artwork, that kind of whimsical, macabre type of look, and Harry Clark, because Harry Clark did some early illustrations of Poe's work. So I thought if I could incorporate that somehow, but kind of create my own unique look to it, that's what I wanted to do. So that's kind of how this, happened. It was kind of an Ed Gorey, look that I wanted to achieve. I'm working on a follow-up deck, which is going to be an oracle deck, and it's called the Nevermoracle. So it's incorporating a lot of his poems and stories into that deck. And I'm also working on a book of poetry and short stories called The Ghosts of Nevermore, which what I'm doing is I'm taking, say, like The Telltale Heart, and then creating a poem or a story inspired by it into that book. So I'm pretty much touching on a lot of his work. So nothing, not one in particular, a lot of everything. I have a website, www.artandsoul.org, which has all of my social links to it. But I also, I have a Facebook group that's dedicated to the Poe Tarot. That's called that. So if you just look up Poe Tarot, you can find it. I also have an Instagram by that name, so you can find it there. But like I said, my website really has everything, all my social media links connected to it.